9 settlements changed control almost simultaneously. The eastern front line moved, but it happened quietly. During the same period, Russian naval forces in the Black Sea, long focused on staying out of direct reach, also came under pressure. Radar coverage around Crimea began to show weaknesses, and supply convoys were hit on routes that had previously been considered secure. These are not unrelated incidents appearing by chance. Multiple levers were pulled at the same moment. The rhythm of the battlefield has started to accelerate, and what we are seeing now is only the opening stage. The center of these developments lies around Oleksandrivka. On a map, it appears small, but its location is critical. This area sits near the point where 3 regions meet: Donetsk, Zaporizhzhia, and Dnipropetrovsk. When regions meet, roads meet. And when roads meet, supply routes converge. Every front depends on those roads. Fuel trucks, ammunition vehicles, engineering equipment, troop rotations, all move along these corridors. If movement slows or becomes dangerous, the entire defensive system begins to weaken. Oleksandrivka connects several of these arteries. The operation around this sector began on January 29th. That same day, another development occurred quietly. Communication terminals that were not registered within Ukraine's official system stopped operating inside Ukrainian territory. This detail did not dominate headlines, but on the battlefield it mattered. Modern combat relies heavily on digital coordination. Satellite communication allows units to share drone feeds, updated maps, and targeting coordinates instantly. A commander can see nearby trenches in real time. Artillery receives corrections within seconds. When that communication network becomes restricted, the picture changes. Information begins to move slower, and if information slows, decisions slow as well. A delay of a few minutes might seem small, but on a battlefield, that delay can determine whether a defense reacts in time. Ukrainian assault formations did not attempt a direct frontal breakthrough through trench lines. Instead, they targeted the environment around those positions. Secondary roads were cut or monitored by drones. Smaller settlements connected by those roads were isolated one after another. Isolation creates multiple problems at the same time. Ammunition resupply becomes irregular. Evacuation routes for wounded soldiers become longer. Communication between forward units and command becomes unstable. After isolation begins, artillery pressure increases. The strikes focus on specific points rather than wide areas. Bridges, intersections, and supply depots become targets. Fuel storage sites are especially important. Fuel determines movement. If fuel stops flowing, armored vehicles cannot reposition quickly. And when vehicles cannot reposition, defensive flexibility disappears. Throughout February, this tempo continued. Ukrainian Commander-in-Chief Oleksandr Syrsky later stated that Ukrainian forces regained more territory during that month than Russian forces captured during the same period. Battlefield indicators support the claim. 9 settlements returned to Ukrainian control. 3 of them were fully cleared, and fighting continued in several others. Clearing a settlement means more than entering it. Units move building by building, establish defensive points, and set patrol routes to prevent infiltration. Only after these steps can the area be considered secure. During these operations, Russian units withdrew from certain positions. These withdrawals were not chaotic retreats. Often they were decisions made when holding a location no longer provided sufficient value. However, withdrawals create empty ground. On a battlefield, empty ground rarely stays empty. Ukrainian units moved quickly into those spaces and established new positions. Once reinforced, the front line shifted slightly. On a map, the change may appear minor, but small movements can open access to larger roads and towns. The strategic effect lies in logistics. The Oleksandrivka corridor connects supply routes running between the eastern and southern sectors. When these routes become threatened, reaction times for frontline units increase. Reinforcements arrive slower, and resupply becomes less predictable. As reaction time increases, initiative begins to change hands. Initiative determines which side controls the pace of events. A force holding initiative decides where pressure will appear next. The opposing side becomes reactive, constantly responding instead of directing operations. Restrictions affecting Russian access to satellite communication complicated this early stage. The limitation did not stop Russian activity entirely, but it reduced operational momentum. Slower momentum means fewer rapid responses and more hesitation when unexpected events occur. Once that hesitation appeared, Ukrainian units exploited the opportunity. Settlements began to fall one after another. As more points changed control, the front line stopped appearing as a straight barrier. Instead, it formed irregular shapes with exposed angles and pockets. Irregular lines are expensive to defend. They require additional manpower and constant surveillance. While these developments unfolded on land, another moment changed the situation in the Black Sea. For a long time, Russian naval vessels had reduced activity in open waters. After earlier losses to drone attacks, ships spent more time inside protected ports. Sevastopol had served as the main base, but several vessels later moved further east to Novorossiysk. Novorossiysk offered distance from the front line and strong air defense coverage. Long-range radars monitored the airspace, while short-range systems protected the port area. The assumption was that distance combined with layered defenses created safety. But during the night of March 2nd, the port itself became the target. The strike did not focus on a single ship. Instead, it affected several elements of the naval base simultaneously. Multiple warships suffered damage. Air defense components inside the port were also struck, including the engagement radar of an S-300 battery and a Pantsir S-2 system. Infrastructure at the Sheskari's oil terminal was hit as well, damaging most of its fuel-loading berths. Fuel infrastructure plays a crucial role for naval bases. Ships rely on constant refueling to maintain patrol operations. If fuel transfer capacity drops, patrol duration decreases and operational flexibility shrinks. The main question following the strike concerns the route used by the attacking drones. Novorossiysk lies far from the front line. Reaching the port requires long-range flight paths that avoid detection. One possible method involves extremely low-altitude flight over the sea surface. Flying close to the water reduces radar visibility due to curvature and ground clutter. Another possibility involves coastal routes where terrain and buildings interfere with radar coverage. Despite the defensive layers surrounding the port, several vessels were hit in sensitive locations. One example is the frigate Admiral Essen, a ship equipped with Caliber cruise missiles capable of striking targets far from the battlefield. Reports indicate the strike occurred near the midship superstructure rather than the hull. That section contains important defensive systems. PK-10 launchers deploy decoys designed to confuse incoming missiles. Nearby electronic warfare equipment detects hostile radar signals and attempts to jam guidance systems. Damage in that area can disable multiple defensive capabilities at once. Target illumination radars, including MR-90 systems, were also reportedly affected. These radars guide air defense missiles during the final stage of interception. If they become inoperable, the ship's defensive envelope becomes weaker. Another vessel hit during the same night was a Molniya-class missile boat. In this case, the strike occurred near the stern section. The stern houses propulsion systems, electrical generators, and close-range defensive guns. If propulsion is disabled, the ship loses maneuver capability. Without maneuvering ability, avoiding additional strikes becomes extremely difficult. The strike against the Sheskari's oil terminal followed the same operational logic. Naval bases are logistical hubs, not simply parking areas for ships. Fuel supply determines patrol range and operational presence. If fuel infrastructure is damaged, the fleet's ability to maintain control over surrounding waters decreases. For several years, the Russian Black Sea Fleet attempted to reduce exposure by operating under protective air defense coverage near ports. The events of March 2nd demonstrated that even those protected locations could be reached. Reports indicated that several ships suffered serious damage during the attack. For the Black Sea Fleet, losing or disabling multiple vessels at once represents a significant operational setback. Then another development occurred far away from both the front line and the Black Sea. Late at night, deep inside Russian territory, an industrial chemical complex was struck. The distance from the battlefield was estimated at roughly 1,300 kilometers. This was not a border region. This was not an active combat zone. It was deep inside the country, indicating that the range of the conflict had expanded beyond the immediate front. That range is unusual. Drawing a line from the Ukrainian border to the Kirov region means crossing multiple defensive belts, radar coverage sectors, air defense zones, military districts, and industrial corridors. Despite those layers, the route was penetrated. The strike reached the Kirovo-Chepetsk chemical combine in the city of Kirovo-Chepetsk. The plant is a large industrial complex located where two rivers meet. Its output includes polymers, mineral fertilizers, specialized chemical compounds, and materials associated with uranium processing. Facilities of this scale function as part of a larger industrial chain. Raw materials arrive from mining sectors, while the final products feed into heavy industry and defense manufacturing. The section hit during the strike was not an administrative structure. The impact occurred at the ammonia production unit. Ammonia in an industrial context represents more than agricultural fertilizer. It is a foundational chemical used as a starting material for numerous production processes. Large ammonia facilities contain pressurized storage tanks, pipelines, and continuous processing systems. When a production unit like this is damaged, the result is not only a localized fire, the disruption can halt the entire production line. The question that follows concerns access. Reaching a location roughly 1,300 kilometers from the front requires both sufficient range and strict route planning. Ukrainian long-range one-way attack drones operate relatively slowly and typically fly at very low altitude. This profile allows them to exploit the limits of radar detection. Because radar coverage follows the curvature of the Earth, objects flying close to the ground appear later on radar screens. If the flight path avoids heavily defended military zones and instead passes through less protected corridors, detection becomes even more difficult. Maintaining an altitude near treetop level and conducting the flight during nighttime hours further reduces detection time. Air defense systems rely on early warning. When detection occurs late, interception becomes harder. Without early detection, defensive response is delayed. Delayed response benefits slow but persistent platforms such as long-range drones. Local reports indicate that several kamikaze drones struck the same area of the facility. The impacts were concentrated on the ammonia unit rather than scattered across the complex. This suggests that the target had been selected deliberately rather than randomly. Within a chemical plant, the ammonia production section functions as the core of the industrial process. Disrupting that part interrupts downstream production chains. The importance of the site relates to three main factors. First, chemical intermediates support the lower layer of industrial production. Polymers and related compounds feed into composite materials and other manufacturing sectors, including those linked to defense production. Second, facilities handling uranium-related materials connect to nuclear fuel processing and energy production chains. Even when the activities are civilian, they remain part of the strategic industrial structure. Third, location matters. The Kirov region is considered a secure production zone because it lies far from the active battlefield. Industrial facilities placed deep inside the country are intended to ensure uninterrupted output if frontline factories become threatened. For this reason, a strike more than 1,000 kilometers from the front represents more than localized damage. It demonstrates that range can extend the battlefield beyond its previous boundaries. At the same time, developments on the ground continue to reshape the operational picture. The front line is shifting, naval bases have faced direct strikes, and industrial infrastructure far from the battlefield has become a target. These elements together show how the operational environment of the war is evolving.